The sound that finally broke me wasn't yelling, wasn't the lawyers, wasn't even the day they changed shut the gate to my own property. No, it was the soft little beep from that keypad turning red while some 20-year-old security guard avoided eye contact and told me, "Sorry, sir, your access has been revoked." I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at the mountains I'd lived beside my whole life, thinking, well, damn, Caleb Mercer. Your wife dies, you spend 40 years building roads and bridges across Colorado, and somehow you still end up getting locked out of your own driveway by a woman wearing pearl earrings and a cashmere blazer. Funny how life works sometimes. My name's Caleb Mercer. I'm 59 years old, and about 8 months ago, I moved back to a little mountain community called Alder Ridge after my wife, Ellie, passed away for pancreatic cancer. 41 years together. Then one morning the hospital room goes quiet, and suddenly the whole world feels too big for one man to carry alone. Denver became unbearable after that. Every street corner had a memory attached to it. Every coffee shop smelled like her perfume. Every damn sunset looked wrong without her sitting beside me complaining I worked too much. So I packed up what was left of my life and drove west toward the old family cabin my grandfather built in 1948. Tucked deep in the pines above Blackwater Canyon. Alder Ridge was supposed to be simple, quiet. 43 homes scattered across the mountain, most owned by wealthy retirees pretending they enjoyed rugged living while their Teslas sat plugged into heated garages. But the place still had charm, old pine trees, cold air that smelled like cedar after rain, neighbors who waved from porches. At least it did before Evelyn Royce arrived. Now, I've met difficult people before. Hell, I spent decades managing state infrastructure projects, and anybody who's worked construction knows you develop a tolerance for egos. But Evelyn, she was something different. 52 years old, always dressed like she was late for a board meeting in Manhattan. Blonde hair perfect even during snowstorms. Smile sharp enough to skin a deer. She moved into Alder Ridge with her husband Grant, some corporate attorney, and their son Tyler, a 30-year-old man with the personality of expired mayonnaise. Within 4 months, she somehow convinced half the neighborhood she should become HOA president. Said the community needed modernization, cleaner aesthetics, higher standards, better property alignment. You know, all those nice little phrases rich people use right before they ruin everything. First time she came to my cabin, I knew trouble had arrived before she even knocked. I heard those heels clicking across my porch like a firing squad marching to work. She stood there holding a leather folder against her chest, while Tyler smirked behind her wearing sunglasses indoors like a damn movie villain. "Mr. Mercer," she said, smiling with all the warmth of an insurance denial letter. "We need to discuss several concerns regarding your property." I remember looking past her toward Ellie's wind chimes hanging beside the porch, listening to them rattle softly in the breeze while this woman prepared to insult everything my family built. "Concerns?" I asked. Evelyn opened the folder dramatically. "Your workshop structure is visually outdated. The vegetable garden is inconsistent with community landscaping expectations. And frankly, the cabin itself no longer aligns with the elevated image Alder Ridge is trying to establish." For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. My grandfather built that cabin with timber he cut himself after returning from the war. My father died repairing that workshop roof during a snowstorm in '86. Ellie planted those tomatoes with her bare hands this summer before she got sick. And this woman stood there talking about community image like she was reviewing paint samples at Home Depot. "Ma'am," I said carefully, "this land's been in my family for over 70 years. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "And that's lovely, truly. But communities evolve. Progress requires compromise." Behind her, Tyler actually laughed under his breath. That little laugh did something to me. Not anger exactly, worse than anger. It reminded me how people like them look at men like me now. Old widower, quiet guy in the woods, easy target. They thought grief made me weak. They thought loneliness made me harmless. They had no idea what kind of man spends 40 years building bridges through avalanche zones and floodplains. I looked Evelyn dead in the eye and said, "The answer's no." Her smile tightened. "I was hoping you'd be cooperative. I was hoping you'd leave my porch." Tyler muttered something sarcastic, but Evelyn lifted a hand to stop him. Then she gave me this cold little nod, like she'd already decided something. "Well, Mr. Mercer, we'll proceed accordingly." The next morning, I found a county inspection notice taped to my mailbox. 3 structures on my property were suddenly under permit review after anonymous complaints had been filed. Funny timing, huh? And standing there holding that paper while cold mountain wine blew through Ellie's empty garden, I realized something that made my stomach turn. Evelyn Royce hadn't come to Alder Ridge to improve the neighborhood. She came looking for ownership. And I think the moment I told her no, she decided she wanted to erase me completely. 3 days after that inspection notice showed up, I woke up to the sound of metal stakes getting hammered into frozen dirt outside my kitchen window. At first I thought maybe the county had sent survey crews early, but then I saw Tyler Royce leaning against a truck drinking coffee with that smug little grin on his face. And right beside him stood Evelyn wearing sunglasses at 8 in the morning like some rich suburban dictator preparing for a military invasion. I walked outside, still holding my coffee mug. "Morning," I said. "Mind explaining why there are strangers standing on my property?" Evelyn barely looked at me. "We're correcting a boundary issue." One of the surveyors adjusted his tripod without making eye contact. Poor guy looked uncomfortable already. Probably realized halfway through breakfast he'd accidentally joined the villain team. "Funny," I said, "because that boundary's been in the same place since Truman was president." Tyler laughed under his breath. "Well, apparently your family measured wrong." That one almost got me. Not the insult, the arrogance. People like Tyler always think confidence counts as intelligence. But confidence is cheap. I've met men on construction sites who could barely spell their own names and still knew more about land, concrete, and integrity than that boy ever would. By noon, they'd marked off nearly 20 feet of my property as community land, and the next morning a fencing crew arrived. 8-foot privacy fencing. Dark stained cedar panels installed directly across the old walking trail Ellie used every evening before dinner. I stood there listening to nail guns echo through the pines while pieces of my life disappeared board by board. Worst part wasn't even the fence itself. It blocked the morning sunlight into my workshop, and for the first time since Ellie died, that old building felt cold. Mrs. Callahan wandered over around lunchtime, carrying a thermos of soup and looking nervous. "Caleb," she whispered, glancing toward Evelyn's house across the ridge, "that fence ain't right." "I know," she sighed softly. "People are scared of her." That part stayed with me. Not angry, scared. Alder Ridge used to be the kind of place where neighbors borrowed tools without asking and checked on each other during snowstorms. Now folks lowered their voices whenever Evelyn's name came up. Fear changes communities slowly, like rotten sidewood. You don't notice it until the structure starts collapsing. That night, I drove into town and hired Donovan Surveying, oldest independent land survey company in the county. Cost me almost $1,000. I honestly didn't have lying around anymore. Widowhood has a funny way of rearranging your finances. Suddenly, every dollar matters because there's nobody left to split the burden with. 2 days later, old Frank Donovan himself walked my property carrying maps older than both of us combined. Took him less than 40 minutes to confirm what I already knew. Evelyn's fence sat 14 feet inside my land. "Son," Frank muttered, shaking his head, "either these people are incompetent or crooked. Can it be both?" He laughed hard enough to cough. That evening I dug through old filing cabinets inside the workshop looking for property records. Dust everywhere. Ellie used to beg me to organize that place, but I always told her engineers don't organize. We create systems nobody else understands. Around midnight, I found an old steel lockbox tucked beneath my grandfather's drafting table. Inside were decades of documents, mining easements, county maps, handwritten maintenance agreements, and one folded paper that changed everything. Mercer Bridge easement rights, dated 1951. I sat there staring at it while snow tapped softly against the workshop windows. At first, I honestly thought I was misunderstanding something. So the next morning, I drove straight to the county records office. 3 hours later, an exhausted clerk named Denise confirmed it. "Mr. Mercer," she said slowly, adjusting her glasses, "your family never transferred ownership of the bridge access easement. Legally speaking, Mercer Bridge still belongs to you. Now let me explain something important here. Alder Ridge only has one road in or out. One, a narrow concrete bridge crossing Blackwater Canyon. Every resident, every delivery truck, every emergency vehicle uses that bridge. The same bridge my grandfather helped pour by hand 70 years ago. And according to county records, the HOA had been collecting state maintenance money for that bridge the entire time despite never legally owning it. Suddenly, a whole lot of Evelyn's behavior started making sense. This wasn't about gardens or aesthetics. She wanted my land because my land controlled the mountain. And once that realization settled into my chest, something changed in me. Grief makes you passive for a while. You stop fighting because survival alone feels exhausting enough. But sitting there inside that courthouse holding proof my family had been quietly robbed for years, I felt awake again for the first time since Ellie died. The next HOA meeting happened Tuesday night inside the community center. Evelyn stood at the front clicking through a PowerPoint presentation titled Community Compliance Enforcement, like she was presenting quarterly earnings to Wall Street investors. Certain residents, she announced coldly, continue violating community standards despite repeated warnings. Then my cabin appeared on the projector screen like evidence in a murder trial. Tyler smirked from the front row. I almost admired how openly awful that family was. "Mr. Mercer," Evelyn continued, "will now face monthly non-compliance fines until corrective action is taken." I stood up slowly. "Before we continue," I said, "I brought something." Rachel Monroe stepped in beside me, right on cue. See, somewhere between the fake permits and the fence war, I'd hired a lawyer. Rachel specialized in property rights and HOA abuse cases. Sharp woman, calm voice, terrifying brain. The kind of attorney who smiles politely while setting your legal future on fire. She handed copies of Donovan's survey to residents across the room while I walked to the front carrying my grandfather's easement records. "Turns out," I said casually, "there's been confusion about property lines." Evelyn's smile faded slightly. "Excuse me, your fence sits 14 feet inside my land." Tyler scoffed immediately. "That's ridiculous." Rachel slid the certified survey onto the projector screen. "Actually," she said sweetly, "it's documented." Murmuring spread across the room. Neighbors started whispering. Evelyn's face tightened. "This changes nothing." "Oh," I said softly, pulling out the bridge easement paperwork. "I think it changes quite a bit." The room fell silent again. I looked directly at Evelyn. "You might want to double-check who owns Mercer Bridge before this goes any further." And I swear to God, the second those words left my mouth, I saw genuine panic flash across her face for the first time. Tiny little crack in the armor, but enough. Enough to let me know she already knew exactly what she'd been hiding. Friday night felt less like an HOA meeting and more like the final scene before a courthouse explosion. By the time I pulled into the Alder Ridge Community Center, satellite news vans were parked along the road. Neighbors packed the sidewalks, whispering in nervous little circles, and Sheriff Dawson already had deputies stationed near the entrance like he knew somebody might try something stupid. Honestly, smart man. People get dangerous when money and humiliation collide. Inside, the room buzzed with that strange energy communities get right before everything changes forever. Folding chairs scraped against the floor, coffee burned in cheap plastic dispensers. Cameras clicked nonstop. And right at the center of it all stood Evelyn Royce in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my first pickup truck, still pretending she controlled the room. That part amazed me most. Even after the audits, the subpoenas, the frozen bank accounts, she still walked around like she was untouchable. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, tapping the microphone, "we are gathered tonight because certain unstable individuals have launched coordinated attacks against this community and its leadership." "Where's our money, Evelyn?" somebody shouted from the back. Then another voice. "Tell them about the fake contracts." Another one. "Tell them why your son's company billed $90,000 for weeds and mulch." The room erupted. Evelyn's face tightened so fast, I thought her makeup might crack. She raised both hands dramatically. Please remain civilized." Civilized. That word almost made me laugh out loud. This woman spent months trying to bury half the neighborhood in legal fees and intimidation, and now she wanted civilization. I stood up slowly from the back row, carrying an old leather folder under my arm. Funny thing about silence, when it arrives at the right moment, it's louder than shouting. The entire room quieted watching me walk forward. Evelyn saw the folder, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. "Evening, Evelyn," I said calmly. "Caleb," she snapped, "sit down. This meeting is under legal review." "That's actually why I'm here." Behind me, Rachel stepped forward rolling in 2 banker's boxes full of documents while Miguel connected a laptop to the overhead projector. The screen lit up with spreadsheets, contracts, payment trails, shell companies, years of theft displayed in glowing white numbers for the entire community to see. You could literally hear people gasping as the totals appeared. 120,000 here, 80,000 there. Maintenance invoices for work never performed. Landscaping contracts awarded to Tyler's fake company. Legal retainers routed through Grant's firm. 8 years of organized theft hidden behind HOA language and fake smiles. Evelyn tried, interrupting twice before Sheriff Dawson told her sharply, "Ma'am, I strongly recommend you stay quiet." But I wasn't finished. Not even close. I opened the leather folder and pulled out the original county easement deed my grandfather signed in 1951. Yellow paper. Fold marks older than most people in that room. "A lot of you drove over Mercer Bridge tonight," I said quietly. "Most of you probably assumed the HOA owned it." I looked directly at Evelyn. "They don't." The room went dead silent. Even the cameras stopped clicking for a second. "My family owns the bridge. Always has." Somebody whispered, "Holy hell." Rachel stepped beside me. "For the last 14 years, she explained, state maintenance funds intended for Mercer Bridge were illegally redirected into a private infrastructure account controlled by Mrs. Royce." Another slide appeared. Payment history, dates, transfers. Nearly $3 million gone. One elderly woman near the front actually sat down hard like her knees gave out. Evelyn suddenly exploded. "Those documents are manipulated. This is harassment. This is a conspiracy by bitter people who can't handle progress. Progress." I cut in softly. "You locked an old man out of his own property because he wouldn't sell you his land." She pointed at me, trembling now. "You have no idea what it takes to build something, to maintain authority. These people needed leadership." "No," Mrs. Callahan said from the audience, standing slowly with tears in her eyes. "We needed honesty." That one hit harder than all the financial evidence combined. You could feel the room shifting emotionally. People weren't just angry anymore. They were hurt, embarrassed, betrayed. Evelyn looked around, realizing nobody was standing beside her now. Not Grant, not Tyler, not even the board members who used to worship her. Just cameras, deputies, and 200 neighbors staring at her like they were finally seeing the truth underneath all the expensive clothes and polished speeches. Sheriff Dawson approached quietly. "Evelyn Royce," he said, pulling handcuffs from his belt, "you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, attempted bribery, unlawful restraint, and filing false police reports. The metallic click of those cuffs, snapping shut, echoed through the room, so clean and sharp it almost sounded cinematic. Evelyn started screaming immediately. About lawsuits, corruption, political enemies. At one point, she actually yelled, "I made this community better," while deputies escorted her toward the door. Nobody answered. Nobody defended her. The only sound was camera shutters firing like rain. And right before she disappeared outside, she turned toward me one last time. God, I'll never forget that look. Pure hatred mixed with disbelief. Like she genuinely couldn't understand how someone she considered beneath her had beaten her. "This isn't over," she hissed. I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "It is." Outside, snow had started falling across Alder Ridge. Soft flakes drifting under police lights while reporters crowded the sidewalks. And standing there watching Evelyn's patrol car disappear down the mountain road. I expected to feel victorious, angry, triumphant. But honestly, mostly I just felt tired. Because revenge sounds satisfying until you finally get it. Then you realize what you actually wanted all along wasn't revenge. It was peace. A month later, the community elected a new board. Transparent finance. Open meetings. Real voting. The bridge stayed open, though the HOA finally paid fair value for maintenance rights, and every dollar went into a scholarship fund Ellie's name now sits on. Funny thing is, people started talking to each other again after Evelyn left. Neighbors brought food over. Kids started fishing near the creek. Somebody repaired the old community garden she tried tearing down. Turns out fear had been poisoning the whole mountain for years. And me, well, I still sit on that same porch most evenings listening to Ellie's wind chimes rattle in the wind. Sometimes I think about Evelyn sitting alone in some tiny apartment after losing everything she spent years trying to control. And if I'm being honest, part of me still wonders whether power changes people or just reveals who they already were underneath. So now I want to ask you something. If somebody tried to destroy your home, your memories, your peace, how far do you go to fight back? And do you think Evelyn deserved what happened to her? Or did the whole thing go too far? Let me know in the comments. Because communities like this exist all over America, and sometimes the scariest neighbors aren't the loud ones. They're the smiling ones holding clipboards.